Well, HIV led the bandwagon where you can basically invent something out of thin air and turn it into a multi-billion dollar, hundreds of billion dollars industry. Another example would be the hepatitis C, which is even acknowledged by Chiron, which used to exist, the company that made the original hepatitis C test, that they never ever actually obtained hepatitis C. They just got bits and pieces of it and then inferred what this virus must be. And people to this day are being tested for something that has never ever been obtained from a human being.
So I want to just substantiate what Dr. Rasnick is saying. He's saying that the literature that we have, the medical literature, the scientific literature, is no longer believable. And it's not just him saying it. Marcia Angel, who was a physician and chief editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, Catherine DeAngelis of the Journal of the American Medical Association, Ushma Anil of another major medical journal, have all quit their jobs and said they are disappointed, disillusioned, and can't believe the low quality of material that's coming across their desk that's published in their journals. And it's because of other factors. There are people who have an axe to grind, who have a mission to accomplish, who have an ulterior motive to be able to get their point across. So if a pharmaceutical company, for example, is doing a study, they're going to make it look the best they can. They're not going to invest $500 million, okay, in a study and come out and say, don't buy our drug, it sucks. So we're seeing a lot of that. So what you're saying is no more than a reflection of what they are saying. And you've personally experienced that.
Yeah, and more people are. It is such an obvious problem now that many of the mainstream people are speaking out.
Even the physicians are beginning to question. Yeah, and look at the direct-to-consumer ads and all the problems that come with that.
California microbiologist Dr. Curry Mullis was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1993 for his development of one of the most widely used current techniques in molecular biology today, the PCR, or polymerase chain reaction. This revolutionary technique allows scientists to take a sample containing a very minute amount of DNA and replicate that DNA sequence until there are many copies. One of the first applications of PCR was to analyze human tissue for the presence of HIV. PCR is commonly used in medical and biological research labs for the detection of virus culture in infectious persons.
The people that are AIDS researchers now are getting neurotic if you ask them any questions. There was a time when I first started asking questions, all I wanted was, where are the papers? Just tell me the papers that you read that convinced you that HIV was the cause of AIDS, because I need to reference those papers in some of the, I was working on a test for HIV with PCR, and I needed to write a little report to the NIH and say, here's the progress we've made. And the first line of it was, HIV is the probable cause of AIDS. And I thought that was true. This is before I got involved. And I said, what's the reference for that quote? And I looked for it for about 2 or 3 years, and I never could find it. And by the end of 2 years, I'd ask everybody at every meeting that I'd gone to that talked about AIDS, I'd ask, you know, I'd look through every computer database. There is no reference. There is nobody who should get credit for that statement. Now, that's a pretty weird situation in science, where getting credit for a discovery is the most important thing in your life as a scientist. It's silly to hear people saying, you don't believe that HIV causes AIDS? You don't believe that? I mean, it's just a word, but it's a very, very important distinction. I think that you know, that's why it's become a very emotional kind of thing, because people actually, they get personally committed to what really is a body of evidence that can be analyzed, you know, by lots of people. And at this point, there's so much of it out there, nobody can really analyze it, all of it, but nobody can write a review of it that says HIV causes AIDS because of this. You know, if a postdoc were to write a review of their literature that showed without much doubt that HIV was the cause of AIDS, that guy would be famous. Now, there's 100,000 guys out there who had the opportunity. Just 10 years has passed. We've been waiting for this star postdoctoral fella to distinguish himself forever and get a lifelong grant from Tony Fauci, but he hasn't shown up. No one has bothered to write a definitive review. Any journal would take it. That right there proves that HIV does not cause AIDS. The thing that I learned, like back in 1968 when I first published a paper by myself in Nature in a field that I had no expertise in at all, there are no old wise men up there at the top of science. Which I really did until '68. I would have thought, you know, if you try to publish a dumb paper in a journal like Nature, it won't get published. If you try to publish a good paper in there, like I later tried to publish PCR, the invention of PCR, in the same journal, and they didn't take it. So it's up there. There isn't an up there there. There's no place up on the Academy of Science is just a bunch of idiots, just like everybody else. You know, the editors of journals, austere journals even, they're just busy with their little lives and stuff. There are no old wise men up on the top making sure that we don't do something really dumb.
Just saying retroviruses are the cause of considerable human morbidity and mortality. Essentials for quality control and laboratory diagnosis. And you will find no single reference even where the proteins, the antigens used in all those tests were isolated from. You see, this is their hidden agenda. They say in their mixture what they are doing, this business in the lab, that they create viruses and viral proteins. And this is a case of self-deception, at least, and deception in case of all other scientists who were supplied by cloned genetic stretches said to represent parts of the HIV genome. Working with this and believing that the original isolation has been performed in a proper way. So, you know, old science was based on faith, on trusting inside the techniques applied by other people. And they never had done it. You find the word control, you don't find in those literature. To mention that you did a parallel isolation attempt with uninfected material. You don't find this. So, and it's just a matter of belief. And of course, they can, for years and decades, go on, well, the virus exists, but it's harmless. Well, we have another model, and now we find it everywhere using PCR techniques. But this is either deception, self-deception, or a bloody lie.
And now they're caught up in a maelstrom. Now if the truth gets out, yes, it will deal a blow to the credibility of the NIH and the CDC and the FDA and the AMA, and my God, it is sorely needed. That blow is necessary to clean up the act.
AIDS started partly when they said that it's possible to measure the strength of the immune system, analyzing or counting T4 cells, the so to say helper cells. But that's not possible, and it has already been published in '81 in the journal JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, saying that it makes no sense to count subsets even of lymphocytes because there was never a correlation. It could be high or low, and people are healthy or ill. It doesn't matter. So this was already known. But the problem was at this time already that in medicine people would not look to the facts, but what is possible to sell on the market, because it was the year 1977 when it became possible to patent medical techniques. So they wouldn't care if there's any clinical meaning behind those measurements, but they just sold it on the market. Gallo lost the rights to the test. This was published in Newsweek in '94, and the American government let him fall like a hot potato, and already the industry built up a new man. This was David Ho here from New York, and he came up with a completely new model of the virus, saying now we have not a slow virus, but we have a virus à grande vitesse, at high speed. And he was using Kerr-Miller's PCR technique, which is a multiplication technique, not a quantification technique, by the way, and multiply molecules into its millions and equal those molecules with the virus, right? Absolutely ridiculous. Even more, as those sequences he's going to multiply and equal them with the virus, that's the viral load, are present in everybody. It's just a way to save face for the whole AIDS industry, because more and more people are aware that this could not be, you know, because inside the 18 there are a lot of critical medical doctors, but they saw such a lot of contradiction, and it was discussed on conferences. So there was high noon for a new medal and a new test where the pharmaceutical companies could make a great business out of it, you know. It has been known already in the mid-70s by Anthony Fauci, by the way. They knew when stress hormones are released, the immune functions are immediately suppressed, because when we are under stress and we have to run away because the lion is behind us, we need no immune functions and waste energy for the replication of immune cells. But the dangerous thing is when we have persistent stress, heavy stress, not like outside the streets, but heavy stress, right? Be it nutritional, be it toxic, be it traumatic, psychological or infectious stress. If this stress is persistent, your body produces a lot of stress hormones, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and they would activate, they stimulate growth. But this is very dangerous, you know, when this persists. So the body wisely makes a reaction against these activation processes, and that's cortisol. And cortisol suppresses every replication of proteins, and therefore as well the replication of cells. So if you are in a state of persistent stress, you are at the same time in a state of persistent hypercortisolism, a huge amount of cortisolism, and then you become thinner and thinner, and your regeneration won't work, and you become more and more positive, means more and more antibodies. But the most important immune functions are not to take care about foreign or not foreign invaders. This is to recycle your own body. 1% of your body mass, and this is an incredible high number, 10 high to the 12 cells have to be recycled every day. And if this is not possible anymore, then you are in a very bad condition, because your body's own proteins are going to endanger your own life, because they are poisonous if they are freely floating around inside your body, and fungal infections may grow on them.
But the truth is, they don't have the virus. What they have is a so-called antibody to the virus. And if you remember, the rationale for getting vaccinated is so the body will create antibodies and you'll be immune to the disease for which you have the antibodies. Well, here they've done a switch in their rationale, and now having the antibodies means that you're subject to getting the disease. That's some flip-flop, if you will, but I mean, they don't think the American people are thinkers. They take them for suckers, and that's the way they've been.
I want to try to clarify a point.
Yes.
I have read in some of your literature, one of your books, that a virus is really not alive but is dead. It is a dead substance, and a dead substance. Why don't you pursue
Okay.
that and
All right.
let us know exactly what a virus itself is, and whether in fact it plays any part in disease.
Right. A virus, so-called, is always dead. There's no such thing as a live virus. Even the so-called live viruses means they were obtained from live tissue instead of dead tissue. But viruses, so-called, are actually genomes. Now, a genome is the genetic material. And if you look at a cell in your body, you have about 100 trillion of them. And each cell has a nucleus. And these nucleuses disintegrate when the cells disintegrate. There are lysosomes which dissolve the cell. And of course, they do not do a thorough job, and the actual nucleus of the cell is well protected. And in degenerating it, it may not completely destroy that nucleus, which is the genome for a cell. That is where the chromosomes, the genetic material, is housed. If it's not destroyed, it just floats in the system, and it's called a cytomegalovirus. But something that most people don't realize is each cell has from maybe 20, 30 to 40,000 mitochondria in each cell. A cell is a little walled-in city, and it has these residents there as independent forms of life, just like bacteria, an independent form. In fact, they're no larger than a bacterium. So when the cell is destroyed, these mitochondria also destroyed, and each mitochondrion has a genome. That's a control center. A genome is to a mitochondrion, or organelles, which they're called, what the brain is to the human body. It's a control mechanism. Okay. It has the blueprint whereby that mitochondrion creates our energy from glucose. It has the blueprint for making specialized proteins that the cell and even the body needs. These mitochondrions are really the basic unit of life. They have collected together, and they have a protected environment called a cell. And of course, cells have united together, and they have a protected environment called a body. But when the cells die, and we have maybe 300 to 500 billion cells dying every day and being replaced at the same rate as a rule, the dead cells disintegrate. When you figure it out, if there's, say, 500 billion cells a day dying, and each one has 20,000 shall we say, mitochondrion dying. Well, you have several quadrillion, maybe a quintillion of genomes that are involved. And if those that survive or don't get completely destroyed, they're dead, yes, but they just float around in the system. Now, there are processes called pinocytosis and phagocytosis, whereby cells recycle the body's own waste. The body's own waste are very subject to use. It's not an alien material, and all it does is the cell takes it in, it actually invaginates it, becomes a little dent in it, and then it envelops the material, and it forms an impromptu stomach, and lysosomes, again, go in and digest this material and break it down into the proteins, the amino acids, and the fats into simple fatty acids or monoglycerides and glycerols, and then the cell can use it. It reconstitutes it into its own materials. So what they're calling a genome is that material which floats around that came out of mitochondria, but they're calling them viruses. After all, the system is based on drugs, and it needs scapegoats in order to justify the system. They're sending the drugs in to destroy these so-called things. Never mind that the drugs destroy the human being more than they destroy anything else, and dead material don't have to be destroyed, it's already dead.
When you say the system now, are you talking about the body mechanism or about people?
When I'm talking about the system, I'm really talking about the medical system.
Okay, all right.
The cartel, which controls it, right.
All right.
They need scapegoats. And when you have disease, they want you to use their representatives, which are called physicians in hospitals and clinics. They want you to go there and get treated, because these people are trained drug peddlers. They don't realize it, but they are sophisticated in drug dispensing. They've been taught that. They're not taught about health in the medical schools. They're taught about dispensing drugs. The pharmaceutical houses, they need drug peddlers. And what they do is elevate trained medical men and women to a high station. They give them semi-divinity, and whatever they say goes, because they know that the medical profession will dispense their drugs that way. Now, you know about medical societies. If someone wants to go and get people healthy and not dispense drugs, they get kicked out, and they lose their license, because the system is set up to serve the drug industry and not to serve the people.
When it was first announced that Dr. Robert Gallo had found the virus that probably caused AIDS, and that announcement was made with Margaret Heckler in 1984 to the press and to the media, without one single scientific document appearing in any journal in the United States.
The probable cause of AIDS has been found.
And she introduced the scientist who led the team, Dr. Robert Gallo. when Gallo's group examined the blood of people.
And as we know now, without any proof whatsoever that the virus caused any disease. The media picked up on it for the sake of a story. And soon the virus that probably caused AIDS was now the virus that caused AIDS. It was proven in the press and nowhere else. Now, I have offered for over a year now, and I continue to offer it, $100,000 to anyone who will give me one scientific document that proves that HIV causes any serious disease. It doesn't. It is a scandal and a scam beyond belief. The virologists who are responsible for this, what do they have to gain? Now, I don't know what Duesberg had to gain, or Charles A. Thomas, or Kary Mullis. He already got his Nobel Prize. Why does he come out and say it? And he's the one that found the test, the PCR reaction. And he said that there is no body of evidence that supports that the virus causes any disease whatsoever. But what about the individuals who have perpetrated this lie? They are all multi-millionaires. What do we have to say about the National Institutes of Health when a private laboratory, independent laboratory, found AZT to be 1,000 times more toxic than the laboratory of the NIH? We can understand a 5% error in a laboratory, even a 10% error. But a 10,000% error or 100,000% error? That's fraud. And as I understand it, the word has gone out, and there's even documents and letters to prove it, that the CDC, the same organization that let blacks go untreated with syphilis, well documented, just to see what would happen with the disease. This same organization who had to admit that they can't give in on the AIDS thing now because nobody would ever be able to trust the government. I think the last election tells us what the people think about government. But science is acting no differently than politicians do. And now we have disease by politics. Isn't it strange that the same day or the day after Robert Gallo filed for a test for HIV after it was announced? This sounds like premeditation. You mean he just happened to have this test available? And so the same day or the following day, he files for a patent? He had a test. He was simply looking for some kind of a disease he wanted to apply it to. And that test. And of course, Fauci said that you need, when he was answering what I did in Cleveland a week ago, he said, well, he's going to have to stick himself 300 times to transmit the virus. Where are you people in the press? 300 times to transmit a virus? You cannot have an epidemic under those circumstances. If you can't transmit it by blood, you certainly can't transmit it sexually, unless you're into real sadistic acts during sex. I don't know how much blood you want to draw. He gives you the answer to the test in 15 minutes. So it's quite a racket. And by the way, it's very interesting because that you asked the question, because you see, I was in a quandary as to what possible purpose could this serve. If you have a test that's 99.997% inaccurate, what are you proving? You would treat somebody with a deadly drug on the basis of a test that's totally worthless. And by the way, let me point out that a research group in Australia in the past year have stated that not only is the test completely inaccurate, it's totally nonspecific. Yeah. That you could be positive if you had the measles, if you had the flu, if you had a flu shot from your doctor, or if you had any one of 100 diseases. Let's look at the scenario. This is serious business. Yeah. Somebody gets the flu, or gets a flu shot this year.
But so what you're finally suggesting is that the man that this prominent physician in Greenwich Village, he in fact said, don't tell anybody about this because I'm making money off of these tests. Are you finally saying to people, don't get tested?
I am saying absolutely do not get tested. Would you advise anybody to take a test that's 99.997% wrong?
And you're saying that...
That's insanity. And by the way, when I said to this physician, when he asked me why I was there, and I told him I was a doctor, I said, because I'm in a heavy risk group. He said, aren't we all? And laughed about it. Because everybody knows that the medical profession sticks itself all the time, and the only individuals who are going to die of AIDS who are part of the medical profession in any way, shape, or form are those who are taking AZT or other drugs. A drug that was discovered in the 60s as a chemotherapeutic drug for cancer and was shelved because it was too toxic to treat cancer. A drug worse than cancer is being used to treat people who are immunosuppressed. But did anybody here bother to look at the insert, the paper that comes with the drug? It's a DNA terminator. It means it is a terminator, just like the movie. It terminates life. You terminate DNA, you terminate life. And they talk about side effects in the insert. When are you going to learn there is no such thing as a side effect in medicine? It's an unwanted direct effect. And you know what one of the unwanted direct effects of AZT is? Lymphoma, cancer, one of the diseases of AIDS, as they call it. Oh, another so-called side effect, which is really an unwanted direct effect, pancytopenia. You need a definition? Pancytopenia. Pan, all, cyto, cells, penia, loss of all your cells. That's AIDS. That is the definition of AIDS. So AZT, by definition, by their own drug insert, causes AIDS, and nobody survives AZT. That will eventually lead to your death. And they've cut the dosage way down because it was killing them too fast. It's like giving somebody a large dose of strychnine and they die within 5 minutes. And so the next person, you give them a few drops of it and they last 4 or 5 days, and you say, strychnine's a wonderful drug. This person lasts 5 times longer. This is the kind of thing that they present to the world. Go ahead.
You said that AIDS is not an epidemic, it's an endemic circumstance caused by a variety of factors, including malnutrition and drug use. How then can you explain the years of potential life loss in the 250,000 plus people who have died of AIDS, according to CDC definition, where drug use has been going on for centuries, and suddenly we're losing people in their 20s and 30s because I'm not sure what you're...
Okay, that's an excellent question, really, and you're using your head. That's the kind of question should have been asked of Gallo at the very beginning. And by the way, you said 20s and 30s, our healthiest people. Isn't it strange? You got a disease, the first disease in the history of mankind, that affects our healthiest? But what happened in the 60s? The drug culture began. What happened in the 70s? It heated up. At the end of the 70s, the gays came out of the closet and became an identifiable group. Now, I'll ask you, in a sense a redundant question, but I think it'll get the point across. I'm going to name 5 of 30 diseases. Tuberculosis, a new disease. Lymphoma, oh, that's a new disease too. Leukemia, oh yes, that's a very new disease too. Pneumocystis pneumonia, another new disease but lesser known. And Kaposi sarcoma, another new disease? No. These diseases and the other 25 have always been around. It's real easy, it's real simple to create an epidemic. You simply take a bunch of diseases and put them under one heading and then claim that one virus is responsible for it. Well, that's nonsense. And now they're caught up in a maelstrom. Now if the truth gets out, yes, it will deal a blow to the credibility of the NIH and the CDC and the FDA and the AMA, and my God, it is sorely needed. That blow is necessary to clean up the act. Spirit and mind are wonderful things. What you're saying is true. It's a sentence of death for most people. And immediately, their body metabolism goes into negative phases. Everything becomes destructive. This is modern medical voodoo. If a doctor tells you, you are going to die, I'm willing to bet you're going to die. I'll be the first one to put money on the line and say, the chances are you're going to beat the statistics. You will die because you've been told so. This is American voodoo. You know that you can change the T-cell count if you worry somebody? Completely established. I worry about these individuals who go in and get these T-cell counts one after another, because their whole life is focused on these T-cell counts. And when it goes down a little bit, instead of being reassured, which is the way I would interpret it, they get panicky. Now they're really doing damage. And at some point, if they're on drugs, and sometimes even if they're not on anything, but because they've been told they're going to die, like the witch doctors of Africa and elsewhere, these individuals will die because they literally worry themselves to death. It's a crime beyond belief. They're the rare ones, I admit. But the fact is, T-cell counts absolutely have no correlation with severity of disease. They can be low because you have wiped out your immune system, and they can be low because you don't need them. That's the important thing to understand. It is not a barometer for anything. And they lie, they lie, they lie, and then they lie some more.